Yes. All right. Hello, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep this as crisp as possible. I'm used to talking a lot, but let's see how this goes. So, this is what we normally see when we think of some bread, right? That's generally what happens. But actually, most people would look at this as actually the real bread. And this is bread which is taken probably over 24 hours to bake as compared to 2 to 3 hours that your normal bread takes to bake. So you understand that the processes are different. So let's look at what makes this a little different. Now, if you have to understand bread, you have to understand the grain, which is wheat. And what you'll find is there is bran, which is the outside surface. There's the germ from which germination happens. And there's the endosperm, which is primarily just mostly starch and protein. And that is what goes into making most bread. Now, here, what you're seeing is sourdough bread, which is made with a culture. And a culture is basically what you create when you mix flour and water and let it ferment over many, many days. That's fundamentally what it is. Yeah? So, let's look at what constitutes the cultures. Now, this, for instance, is what lactic acid bacteria looks like under a microscope. And this is responsible for actually fermenting it and giving it a slightly sour flavor. That's what it does. As compared to this is wild yeast, which actually raises the bread or leavens the bread and produces alcohol, which unfortunately goes off when you bake the bread. You can't eat it. Yeah? So fundamentally, this is what happens with sourdough bread as compared to regular bread, where you have only yeast, which is there. Now, if you look at today's commercially available bread, it comes in a plastic wrapper, and in addition to flour, water, salt, and yeast, there are a lot of additives which are added, which may or may not be good for us over a period of time. It's a debatable question. As compared to that, if you look at sourdough bread, it has just flour, water, salt, and some quantity of natural yeast. That's fundamentally what it is. Yeah? And if you look at the combination of these two, which is the lactic acid bacteria and the wild yeast, they create a kind of a symbiotic relationship which helps the dough develop, but in many ways prevents the other microbes from kind of messing around. That's what they do. And that's really what's fabulous about this completely natural process which we have. Yeah? Now, therefore, good sourdough is really slow fermentation. That's what it equals to, where time is used as a very crucial ingredient. That's fundamentally what good sourdough is all about. Now, in sourdough, you can have different types of sourdough. You can have type 1, which is fundamentally sourdough which is made only with a fermented culture. You can have type 2, where there's some quantity of the flour which is made with the fermented culture, and then they add shitloads of commercial yeast. And there is type 3, which is fundamentally about everything being dried and everything being put together into a powder form so that the baker just has to make it out there. Yeah? So, if you look at the advantages of sourdough, firstly, it's a low glycemic index bread, which means when you eat it, you don't get sugar spikes in your bloodstream, which happens very often when you eat regular bread. If you look at the other advantages, there is something known as phytic acid. Now, phytic acid is a component which actually prevents our body from absorbing a lot of nutrients which are present in the grain. And what sourdough does is it degrades the phytic acid and therefore makes it easier for our body to absorb a lot of micronutrients which are present in the grain, which otherwise goes out in our poop. Yeah? Now, yeah, I'm doing okay. Yeah. Okay. The other thing is sourdough is also very high on digestibility, And this is because the gluten degradation happens very quickly in that. And the advantage of sourdough, other than flavor, is that it has a great high keeping quality. What does that mean? What this means is you can bake a loaf of bread and you can keep it at room temperature for about 3 to 4 days and nothing happens to the bread. Because of the lactic acid bacteria, it prevents anything from happening to the bread. That's fundamentally what it is. So what I've got for you is a few pictures of what these bread looks like. And this one, for instance, is 100% whole grain bread. Yeah, there's nothing missing from it. It's got all the goodness of whole wheat and everything. So when you eat this, it feels nice. Trust me when I say that. Yeah. So that's whole grain bread, and this one is 100% whole grain bread, but this has nori sushi put inside. So there are little layers of nori sushi which has been added. So it's, some may say it's non-vegetarian, but nori sushi is actually a seaweed, so it's actually vegetarian. It's just that it tastes a little fishy in comparison. So fundamentally, if you look at sourdough bread, how do you recognize? It has a hard crust and it has super soft interiors. And that's what makes it really nice to eat and makes us eat far less. That's fundamentally what it does. Now, if you have any questions or anything at all to ask me, you have time in between when we have the break or even after this event is over to come and talk to me. Thank you very much.